my name is Noah Watkins. I am an education specialist, and today we are going to go over spaces and zones for HVAC design. So looking into some of the things that we can do getting ready for designing for HVAC in Revit. Today's agenda, I'll introduce myself, go a little bit into my background. We'll go over some learning objectives that hopefully by the end of the time you'll be able to be confident in understanding the premise of. I'll do a demonstration, and at the end we'll probably have some time for some questions and answers based on that as well. Like I said, my name is Noah Watkins. I am a pilot instructor. I'm based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I do have my associate's degree in drafting and design technology, and I've worked as a mechanical designer and a BIM coordinator in the past, using AutoCAD and Revit since 2010. I am both certified in Revit MEP Mechanical and also in AutoCAD, and I am an Autodesk certified instructor as well. If you're on LinkedIn, you can link up with me at the following address, and I do have a list here of Autodesk programs that I've used either in the past in a professional setting or that I'm knowledgeable and trained in as well. So hopefully today we're going to set up an architectural model that we can use to get information based on our mechanical design that we want to see. We want to start taking that architectural model and bring it in and use it for our benefits. The architect is already set up, has things in place already based on what they are doing and the design that they're doing. So we want to be able to take that and utilize that to the best of our abilities as well. Go in, start putting information in to get volumes, start putting information in to get perimeter area, things of that nature, based on what we want to see and what we're wanting to use for a design as well. In this Tech Talk, I will be primarily using Revit to go over and to show these things. For the learning objectives, I like to view these as a checklist, so hopefully by the end of the time we can go through these, have an understanding of how to use these, get more insight into a better way to go in and start working with a mechanical design. So hopefully by the end we'll be able to see how we can convert rooms to spaces, so we can use our mechanical or any other purposes that we might want to have utilizing those spaces. We want to also be able to go in and look at setting up zones. So being able to put some of these spaces together to create a zone to get more in-depth information based on our design as well. Once we do that, we want to look at inserting mechanical equipment into these spaces and into the rooms that we have there. Once we can do that, we want to look a little bit more in depth and also look at using our system browser so we can get more information. We can work a little bit more towards our design to get more information to help us out as well. So today's workflow of what we're going to cover, we're going to look at creating spaces in Revit, going in and utilizing the space tool that we have to create spaces in Revit. Once we've created the spaces in Revit, we want to go back and use the space naming tool to take the room names that the architect already has in place and convert those to space names so we can use those a little bit more towards our advantage. We don't have to go back and retype in everything. It's already there, so why not convert it over and use it for our uses? Once we do that, we're going to create a space schedule so we can organize things a little bit better, sort of weed out anything that we don't want in there and just see what spaces we have that we can utilize, get information about those spaces. After that, we're going to look at creating zones in our model. If we need to go in and zone out different VAV boxes for different rooms that we have, we can go in and create zones in our model. Once we've created the zones, once we've zoned out things that we're looking at, we might want to go back and start placing the equipment in our model. So go in, start placing in air terminals, start placing in VAV boxes, any other type of equipment that we might want to have to start getting our design in place. Once we place in the equipment, we want to go in and create a system based on the equipment that we've placed in. So then getting more information into our model that we can use for our design work. Once we have that in place, we'll be able to go back, utilize our system browser to better help our design out and to look at fixing it and maintaining our design as we move forward. So the first thing that we'll look at is converting rooms to spaces. If we go to our Analyze tab and our Space and Zones panel, we have a space tool that we can go in and we can place spaces into the model that we have linked in that we're using from the architect. From that, we can get different volume. We can get different information that we put in place. We can go in, get a little bit more depth, and look at how we want to view these spaces, how we're setting up our building, how we're utilizing it, how it's going to be built. We can put all this information in as we're working on our design to better help our mechanical design as well. Or if we're using it for electrical purposes, we're working with an electrical contractor, we can use it and put information in to help the electrical contractor as well, or help out from that aspect. Once we put these spaces in, the next thing that we'll want to do is use our space naming tool so that we can convert room names to space names. Again, we want to be able to go in, we want to be able to utilize what the architect already has in place. So once we go in and use the space naming tool, we'll convert those room names to space names so we don't have to go back and retype everything. Again, everything will be matched up and working from that aspect. So first step is getting those spaces in and utilizing everything that we have in our Analyze tab to get everything ready and prepared for what we need. Once we do that, we want to go through and we want to create a space schedule, something that we can work with, something that we can get information from. We can go in, we can get the room name. We can get the room number that we're working with, the areas that we're working with. We can go through if we've created spaces and we have too many spaces that aren't a part of the architectural model, we can go back and we can take those spaces out. We can get design information into this space schedule to have it work for us so we can do design checks as well as needed. Once we've set up our schedule, we can always go back, we can create zones. We can link multiple spaces together to combine and get more in-depth design information for what we want to use as well. If we want to, we can go back and we can make a zone color legend that we can print out to use for our benefits as well, being able to see how we zone our building, how we zone the project, and what we want to look at as we're going about it. Again, after that, once we get everything laid out, once we get the idea of what we're going to work with, we want to start putting in our air handling unit. We want to start putting in our air terminals. We want to start putting in our VAV boxes to start getting that design coming to life. Getting the information in to use based on our needs, getting the design criteria in so we can look a little bit more in depth, again, using our space schedule to work and doing design checks, getting things in based on our needs and based on what the client wants as well. Once we do that, we want to create our systems. We want to go back and utilize our system browser to organize our design and get more system information with what we're using. So again, going in, creating systems in what we put in place and what we utilize, then having it set up so as we go back, we can use the system browser that we have. We can locate it, we can enter information into it, we can get design information from our system browser as well. We'll go into our Revit model. Right here, I have an architectural model that I've linked in, that I've brought in. If I go to my Manage tab at the top and I manage my links, I have this architectural model that I have linked in. From here, we want to start getting information from it. We want to go in, we want to start doing our design and working with it. I want to make sure that when I go to my selections, that I have my select links on, and if I pinned this link down, I want to make sure that I have my select pinned elements down as well. Once I do that, I want to select the architectural link that's in place, because I want to go in and I want to deal with this a little bit more in depth and get some information out of it that I might not necessarily have access to just yet. When I click on my link, I'll want to go to my edit type properties for that link itself. You'll notice when I go in and I look at room bounding, it's turned off. Well, when I go and I place spaces, if I have my room bounding turned off and I go to place a space in, you'll notice it can't find anything to use and won't attach to any of the rooms that I have in here. It's not seeing that the walls create a space or create a room that I can pick out of. So again, very important, just make sure that I go back to my selections, make sure I have select links, select pinned elements on, and select my link in the model. Once I do that, I can go back, I can edit the type, and I can turn room bounding on. Once I do that, once I hit OK, now I want to go to my Analyze tab at the top, to my Spaces and Zones panel, and I want to start placing spaces into my model. Now when I hover over it, you'll see that it wants to latch on, it wants to create these spaces that I can use. As I'm going in, as I'm working with these spaces, you'll notice that by default, my upper limit is the first floor with an offset at 8 feet. As I'm looking at this model, maybe I have a larger first floor than that. This is just a default that's in. If I place this in and utilize it, I will only get up to 8 feet of information for my volume. I will only get up to that 8-foot limit of what I'm working with. So as I go in, as I place these spaces, I'll want to make sure that my upper limit goes to my second floor. And I'll want to make sure that that offset is at 0 feet so that it will go all the way up to my second floor. Once I do that, once I find where I want that to go, I can place that space in my model. You'll notice I had tag on placement so that my space tag came in as I placed that. If we look a little bit more in depth and do a section view of this space, we'll see that we have this space that's in our model now. You'll notice even though I had it going to my second floor, it stops at the ceiling. So that way I know that I get information that I can use a little bit more in depth based on this room. I have the volume for the room. I can get in-depth information that I'm working with. As I click on this and I go to my properties, again, I have information in here that I can work with. I have an area. I have a perimeter. I have an unbounded height of what I'm working with as well. I have a volume of this room. From here, I can go in and I can put more information in. If I need to have a specified supply airflow for this room, I can go in there and I can put supply, return, any exhaust air that I might need for this room. I have identity data as well for this room. Right now, because it's a space, the name is space, the number is 1. I can also see the room name and room number based on what the architect had and what they put in place in that same area. So again, I can see that that's in place, that's ready to go, and I need to look at how I can get that information. Yes, I could just type it in and copy it over, but do I want to do that with every room that's in there in the architectural model? Probably best if I go in and I work a little bit more in depth and I have it so I can automatically copy that over. If I need to have a plenum, if I need to work with anything in that plenum, what I wanting to have in there, what am I working with this location? How do I have everything in place? What do I want to work with as I'm placing this space in? I can get out of that, go back, and I can go back and I can start placing more spaces in. I can place them in one at a time, or the other thing that I can do is I can place them automatically. In my Modify and Space contextual tab that pops up, I can place these spaces automatically in my model. So as I'm going in, as I'm clicking on here, it will go through and it will place these spaces automatically in my Revit model. 236 spaces created automatically, and as I'm looking at it, as everything is in place, I can go in and I can see that all these spaces are put in there. But in some cases, I might not want to have spaces automatically placed in. You'll notice that I have some column wrapping here. Maybe I don't want that to be a space. I don't want to get design information from those spaces. Or I don't want to look at heating and cooling in some of these risers that are here. So I have some spaces in here that may or may not be needed, again, based on what I'm looking at, what I'm trying to accomplish from this model as well. So once I've done that, once I have these spaces in place, again, we looked at this space 1 that was over here, and we saw that there was information regarding a room name and a room number based on what the architect had and what they were working with. When I go back to my Analyze tab, I have a space naming tool that I can use here. Once I click on that, that will give me the option of going through and converting any of the room names and room numbers to space names and space numbers as well. I can either do it by names and numbers. I can do names only. I can do numbers only. Again, based on what we want to see, what we want to have in place. For this, I'll go in, I'll make sure it's the name and numbers, and I'll hit OK. Once that happens, you'll notice everything gets converted over based on what the architect had in place. Again, we don't want to have to redo work. We don't want to have to go back and copy and retype everything in based on our needs. It's already set up. The architect has it there. We can convert that over and utilize that from that aspect. Once we do that, we see that there's spaces here still in place that are unnamed and have a number to them. Well, if I go over and I try to delete these, and I click on it, and I click delete, it will be deleted, but the space still exists. I can always put a tag back, but I'll have to go a little bit more in depth to delete this space. If I delete it again, it will say the space is deleted from all model views, but it's still in this project. I'll have to go into a schedule and remove it from there. So from that aspect, I'll go to my View tab. I'll go to my Create panel to Schedules, and I'll create a new schedule that I can use. From this, I can go and select the category that I want. For this purpose, spaces. I'll make a space schedule, and I'll work with that. I'll click OK to go in and look a little bit more in depth at this space. What do I want to have? What information do I want to see for this schedule? Well, the first thing I can do, I can go in, I can make sure the area is there. So I see the area of the spaces that I have to work with. Again, see a little bit more in-depth information and see how everything comes together. From here, I can also go and I can look at room information. Maybe I want a room name. Maybe I want a room number to better look at this. And maybe I want to organize this a little bit better and put my area at the bottom so I have my room name and my room number here. Once I've done that, I might want to go to sorting and group. So I can go in and I can sort by the room name that's there in ascending order. Or if I want to sort by room number, I can do it from there. Typically, I like to keep it to room name, so we keep everything alphabetical and work from there. Once I do that, once I hit OK, I'll go in and I'll have the information here that I can work with. I have all my room names here from the architectural model, and you'll notice that anything that wasn't in that architectural model doesn't have a name here. So I know that this is something that came in, it was automatically created, and I don't need for this project. I can hold Shift, I can select the last aspect here, and I can delete it. So I can delete any of these spaces and any of the associated space tags that go with it. Once I do that, again, I can look here, I can see the room name, the room number, I can get information that I can work with a little bit more in depth based on things that are there. I can go back to my fields, I can start looking a little bit more in depth about information that I want to have in place that I want to utilize for these spaces. If there's more information that I want to put on my space schedule, I can go in and put that information in from there. Once I do that, once I go back to my first floor HVAC plan, I have a working design that I can start looking at a little bit more in depth to see the rooms that I'm working with, to be able to go in and start zoning things out and work a little bit more based on what I want to see as well. So earlier we went to the Analyze tab at the top here to do spaces. Well, another thing that we can do is create zones. By creating zones, we are taking multiple spaces and combining them to make a zone. So by that aspect, this zone was here. I can always take that out to make sure that I don't have that with my zone. If I want to go back and create a zone, I can create a zone. I can add spaces that I want to have or remove spaces if they're in the way and I don't want them anymore. So coming down here to these second grade rooms, maybe I want to zone them together. Maybe I want this second grade room to be zoned and working together. I can finish editing my zone. Again, I get more in-depth information. The occupied area, the occupied volume, the perimeter of this zone. I can go back, I can add more spaces. Again, maybe I need to zone this side as well to have these all on the same zone. I can go through and I can zone as much as I need or as much as I want to use. Once I do that, I can always go and I can create a new view of this by duplicating it with the detail so that I have everything in place, going back, renaming this, as first floor zones, to put that in place, and I can go to my Analyze tab, to my Color Fill panel, to Color Fill Legends here. From there, I can place a color fill in here. I can choose what I want to work with. For this purpose, we'll work with HVAC zones, and we'll use the color scheme that's in place and hit OK. From that aspect, I can create zones that are in place. Based on what I've had, what I've used in here, I can go in, I can edit the scheme to look a little bit more in depth. Do I want to do it by name? Do I want to do it by area? Do I want it to do it by level? What preview do I want? What color do I want for this? As I'm placing in zones, as I'm placing in everything based on that aspect, I can get a color fill schedule that I use for these zones. Once I do that, I can see that a little bit better. I can work with it a little bit better and print it out for my design as well. Now that I have zones in place, now that I'm ready to go with that, I can go back and I can start looking at placing my equipment in. Where do I want to have everything that I'm working with? Where do I want to place it in? How do I want it to function? How do I want to get my design rolling from there? I'll go to my Systems tab, and I'll start placing in my mechanical equipment. Go to my Properties, and I have my air handling unit. Maybe I need to put my air handling unit over here. Maybe I need to go to a coordination plan and a ceiling plan so I can place in air terminals in these rooms as well. Go in, place air terminals that I want to use. Give it a height that I want to use as well. And place these in. I can always place them in at the first floor. Maybe I want to place it in at the main ceiling. Depending on how I want to place it in, how I want everything to come in, I can choose where I want to place that in, and I can start putting these air terminals in as well. When I click on the air terminal, I have airflow. I have pressure drop associated with it, again, for my design. I'll align this up a little bit better so it's within the 2x2 grid, and I can place all these in that I want to from that aspect as well. I can go back, I can copy these and move these around based on where I want them to be as well. If I find a good placement for them, again, copying and placing them where I want them to be. Once I have that in, once I've worked with that, maybe the next thing I want to do is go back and start putting in my VAV box. So I know that I want to have all of this on one zone, so I want to have a VAV box for this zone. I'll go back, I'll go to my Systems, to my mechanical equipment, and I'll start looking at placing in a VAV box that I want, positioning it where I want and placing it in based on my needs as well. So maybe I want to put it in the second grade 303 room. I can place that in and utilize that from there. My inlet, my outlet of what I'm going to use and what I want to put in place. At that point, I can go back, I can work a little bit more in depth based on what I want to see, and I can put more of these in place, again, based on where I want them to be, based on how I want to have my layout for what I'm working with, and what I'm utilizing. Again, I can always go back, align these up to get these more in place. So once I have my layout, once I have everything that I'm working with, now maybe I want to go back, move these around a little bit, and start working on getting my system together and create it. I'll go back to my plan, and from this aspect, I want to create a system that I can use. By clicking on my air terminal in my Modify Air Terminal contextual tab that pops up, I can go in, I can create a ducted system. From here, it's going to ask me what system type do I want. For this, it'll be supply air. What system name I want. Maybe I want to have second grade, 301, 303, and 305 as my system name. And I also want to open this in my system editor. Once I do that, I want to add to the system of what I want to have. I can always add or remove based on my needs. For this aspect, I want to have all these air terminals in there. I want to go back. I want to be able to select the equipment that I'm using as well. Once I do that, I can finish editing that system, and I have a system here that I've created. Again, I can click on this. I can get information from it. Based on this VAV unit, it tells me the system name that it's a part of. Same if I click on the air terminal unit. I get more in-depth information based on that. I can see that. I can work with it from that aspect. By going to my system browser, by going to my View tab, User Interface to make sure that I have my system browser on, I can start building and seeing the systems that I have in place. I can get more in-depth information from this as well. Let me stretch this out so we can see this. Based on the information that I have there, based on what I'm working with. It tells me the supply diffusers that are there. If I click on them, it will show me in the model where that item is based on what I want to see as well. So as I'm going through, I can get more in-depth information from that. I can see the CFM based on everything that's there. If I need to go back and change this information, I can always go to the diffusers that are there and change the flow information there. It will update. It will give me more information from there. It gives me a space name that it's associated with and a room name and a space number as well that it's associated, so I can find it a little bit more in depth. Again, going through, being able to utilize it and set it up for our needs to get the information that we want to see and what we want to utilize as well. From that part, we can get more design work done. We can work on building off of the design that we've started, getting duct sizes, and start putting in duct as well based on what we want to see and what we want to utilize in our design. Once we do that, we can go in, get everything ducted that we want to get more accurate information from what we want to see as well. If you need to ask any questions down the line, feel free to shoot an email at the following location. But again, have a great day, and hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week. Thank you.